This is apropos. More than 6 months into the US-brokered ceasefire, Gaza continues to be hit by near daily Israeli fire, and progress on moving to the next phase of the truce is stalled. Donald Trump's peace plan envisages the withdrawal of Israeli troops and the disarmament of Hamas, neither of which are any closer to being implemented. With much of the territory reduced to rubble, the latest assessments suggest that over $71 billion will be needed over the next decade for recovery and reconstruction efforts, as Luke Schrago reports.
$71.4 billion over 10 years. That's how much the United Nations, World Bank and European Union estimate Gaza will need to rebuild in the wake of Israel's devastating war on Hamas, with an urgent upfront cost.
The scale and extent of deprivation have pushed back human development in the Gaza Strip by 77 years. Immediate recovery needs, to be addressed in the first 8 months, are estimated to be $10.8 billion, while short-term recovery needs, with a focus on restoring critical services, are estimated at $15.5 billion.
Looking at the 2 years of conflict that a fragile ceasefire halted last October, the rapid damage and needs assessment found entire sectors devastated across the Gaza Strip, from housing to health, education and agriculture. Half the Palestinian enclave's hospitals are non-functional, nearly all of its schools have been damaged or destroyed, with 60% of the population having lost their homes and 1.9 million people, almost the entire population, repeatedly displaced. The report also underlined conditions needed for successful reconstruction. In particular, a sustained ceasefire, adequate security, unimpeded access for aid and the free movement of people and materials between the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. But with mistrust enduring between Israel and Hamas, which is clinging to control of Gaza, the situation looks anything but promising.
For the two-state solution to have a fighting chance, both sides must deliver. Israel must stop its settlement expansion. The Palestinian Authority needs to move with reforms. In Gaza, Hamas' refusal to disarm remains a major obstacle to peace.
The Board of Peace, brainchild of Donald Trump to oversee an end to the Gaza war, has said it's been in discussion with Hamas in recent weeks. However, multi-billion-dollar pledges made to the board 2 months ago at a Washington summit have yet to materialise.
Well, to discuss, we're joined now by Dr Deen Sharp, urban geographer and co-editor of Open Gaza, Architectures of Hope. Deen, thanks so much for being with us on the programme. Let's start with that book that you co-edited. It describes Gaza as a place of fortitude, resistance and imagination. After the devastation of the past 2.5 years, can that still be the case?
Thank you. Well, that book was published in 2021 and very much a reaction to Operation Protective Edge that happened in 2014. And the idea of the book as well was to imagine Gaza like any other urban context and to show that if a rational, optimistic urban plan based on just rational planning, what could be achieved. It imagines ferry connections from Gaza City to Marseille. It imagines a Gaza that looks to its hinterland rather than hemmed in and trapped by the sea. And the possibilities and potentials, of course, Gazans, and Palestinian Gazans across the diaspora, engineers, architects, creative artists, and have shown an amazing fortitude and resilience. And of course, if given the right to the city and the right to the urban context, could produce an incredible and just urban context. But the concern is that they are, of course, being increasingly excluded from any kind of decision-making and agency in which they live. This report that you mentioned that states now a $71 billion need for reconstruction is an update of a report that was done last year that actually stated 50 billion. And all of these guesstimates and so on really around the reconstruction kind of detract from the main issue, which is governance. And it was a concern to me that in the last report done in February 2025, it made very clear that reconstruction, any approach to reconstruction must be Palestinian-led. This is what the report said. It was very clear. It must be a Palestinian approach to reconstruction, and that Palestinian-led processes that reconnect Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank. But in this latest version, that language is removed, and we're now led with this Trump's Gaza reconstruction plan that we really don't know much about, and everyone is just waiting and watching. But governance is really going to be the key here to any sort of start to a reconstruction process that remains really to begin. There is no large-scale reconstruction, and the rubble removal challenge alone is just something that we've not really witnessed in human history before, in such a condensed space with a density of population that is just unprecedented. They're talking about, a 15-year process for rubble removal, and that, of course, depends on how many trucks the Israelis will allow in to do rubble removal. Before, in 2014, for instance, it was 90 a day. The numbers of trucks of cement that the rubble is there is just kind of unfathomable. So, before even talking about large-scale reconstruction, there's got to be a mobilized effort to really clear the rubble on a scale that, again, it's just unprecedented.
Bearing all that in mind, where do you even start when it comes to trying to get an enclave, get a whole territory back up and running, so to speak, particularly given the fact that security threats remain an issue and that Israeli fire continues on a near daily basis?
Well, I'm, of course, like most people, not very hopeful in this current moment, but there is an interesting person heading up Trump's Gaza plan in the form of Mladinov, who's a former UN special representative, and interestingly has not been a fan of previous Trump peace plans, but he's heading up this current negotiation. He has, in the past at least, had the respect of both Israelis and Palestinians when he was the UN Special Envoy on the Israel-Palestinian conflict. So he is in negotiations. As I said, we don't know much about these negotiations. I'm concerned from this report that language around the Palestinian-led approach to reconstruction has disappeared. And we're seeing talks around Palestinian participation within an international administrative framing. But, we have no idea what this board of peace is. Is it, an occupational administration? Is it a trusteeship? It just all lacks details within the public domain. So we're trapped out. And in terms of those on the ground in Gaza, as you mentioned, we're seeing continued conflict and absolutely no meaningful movement on rubble removal, let alone reconstruction.
And realistically speaking, when do you think that's all going to begin, and who exactly is going to pay for it? We've seen so many pledges coming into Donald Trump's so-called board of peace, but as you say, very little actually changing, nothing essentially happening on the ground to date.
Yes, I mean, as with everything around this board of peace and the Trump administration, it's largely opaque and lacks details. So, I can't give an answer to that question because it's just not in the public domain. I mean, there are reports from news organizations that many of the pledges that were made at the board of peace haven't materialized, but of course we have no access to any sort of means to verify anything, whether they have or haven't been given. And in terms of all the negotiations that are going on around Trump's Gaza peace plan, it's completely opaque. But so, Gazans are just left, and Palestinians, both in Gaza but also in the West Bank, are kind of left in limbo, and the large-scale reconstruction needs and the squalor in which Palestinian Gazans are being left to live in at the moment is just absolutely inhumane and really lacks any sort of human solidarity. And I think it's really a real scar on our global consciousness that I really think with many others around the world, and you see the solidarity movements across the world, and Architects for Gaza being one, prominent one in relation to the built environment, that are kind of mobilizing and not letting this situation go without some sort of protest and indignation at the lack of humanity.
And Deen, when we see this level of devastation, as you say, we haven't seen it elsewhere, but it's not just physical buildings that are being destroyed here and that have been destroyed. We're talking about an entire culture and heritage as well, aren't we?
Yes, I mean, this is, of course, the Palestinian struggle, and, you know, the Gaza itself has long had incredible sites of historical, religious, cultural significance. I mean, it was an incredibly significant port historically, but also Palestinian culture, of course. It's being decimated, and it's all too clear and painful to see. And that was one of the main messages of Open Gaza Architectures of Hope, that it really does not need to be this way, and to, you know, physically produce a artifact, being a book that documented the ways in which the circumstances are being resisted, but also creative imaginaries for different paths of coexistence, peace and justice.
Deen, we'll have to leave it there for now. Thanks so much for being with us, though, on the programme. That's Dr Deen Sharp, urban geographer and editor, as we say, of Open Gaza Architectures of Hope. Thanks so much.